Hello and welcome to Matillion's virtual series, Leading the Data Transformation. During this series, you'll hear from Matillion, Snowflake, and our partners and customers on how modern enterprises are driving real business value from data and cloud strategy. You'll learn how your peers select and implement a cloud data platform, the methods used by innovative and often remote data teams to get their first quick wins, and much, much more. No matter where you are on your cloud data journey, you'll leave each session with a list of actions to take back and use with your team immediately. So in this session, from on-prem to the cloud, you'll listen in as data leaders from Waste Management, Viewgol and Powell Industries, three joint customers of Snowflake, Matillion and Hashmap, share the successes and challenges of moving their data practice from on-prem to the cloud. You'll hear how they selected Matillion ETL for AWS on Snowflake as their cloud data platform, what they learned along the way, and what was on the horizon for their teams now. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's roundtable on Lead the Data Transformation. From on-prem to cloud, we've got Matillion, Hashmap, Waste Management, Viewgol, and Powell Industries. First of all, don't worry if you miss something today. If you have to step away, we will record this. We'll have the session available on demand on both Matillion.com and HashmapInc.com. So, real quick, I am your host and moderator. I'm Kelly Coleffel. I run sales, marketing, and alliances for Hashmap. We're a boutique data and consulting firm. We're partnering with clients to deliver outcomes across 20 industries, and we've done about, 240, 250 data and cloud projects since 2018. I will be moderating, and with the constant buzz that everybody's hearing about today in the data and analytics space across pretty much every industry, the one constant that we hear with our clients is a little bit of uncertainty. How do we move workloads from on-prem to the cloud? I want speed, I want business impact, I want this done fast. And what we're hoping to do today is provide you with a little bit of real life stories, some unique perspectives on moving those data and analytics workloads from on-premise to the cloud, three different industries, three different perspectives, and most importantly, how Matillion helped in those transformations. So really pleased to have with us today, we've got Tyler Wheatley with Waste Management. They are the #1 environmental services and waste management company in the US. We've also got Harry Hopkins with Viewgol. They are a startup providing revenue cycle management solutions, RCM, for providers in the healthcare industry. And then lastly, we've also got, certainly not least, Ajay Badani with Powell Industries. They're a 2,000 plus person electrical equipment manufacturer founded in 1947, and today they have locations across North America and Europe. So gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I want to get into the on-prem challenge that we're dealing with. You guys are from different industries. There's a common thread though. You all went on-prem to the cloud with Snowflake and with Matillion, so both those technologies have played a key part. Let's take a step. Tyler, why don't you kick things off? Tell us a little bit about your role and a little bit more about the company.
Sure. So I'm a senior manager in our enterprise analytics and data management organization. So my responsibilities are over data architecture, data warehousing, ETL development, and master data management. I've been with Waste Management for 10 years. I've been working in the data landscape for 20 years. And it's been a great journey trying to get going from our on-prem solutions into the cloud, and looking forward to speaking with you guys today.
Excellent. Harry, welcome. Give us a little quick background, little bio.
Sure. So I function in that, I would say, CIO, CTO role. It's sort of a combined role right now, just based upon our size, but really on an everyday basis, I work with our sales and operations team to make sure that the technology that we're developing and integrating aligns with what they're identifying as the need in the market. So it means that I do a lot of evaluation of technology, just to make sure that we as a startup kind of have different parameters than maybe as an existing business. So that's pretty much my daily role.
Excellent. Welcome. And Ajay, tell us a little bit about your role and if any more context on Powell, if you'd like.
Sure. So Powell is a provider of basically electrical solutions. Switchgear is mostly what we do. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but just think like high school lockers, but much bigger and much more dangerous. No, that's just for a visual. We do integrated solutions. We do power automation as well. We are a fabricator first and foremost for the longest period of time over that span, but we definitely are an engineer to order manufacturer. So don't think widgets, think requirements that change from customer to customer. People come back to us. So my role is predominantly to deal with the business systems that our manufacturing and product design users use to do these jobs. But increasingly, it's become more, and in fact, quite soon it'll be more focused specifically on digital enablement and insights. Trying to basically lead a bit of that digital transformation at the company, but specifically around how data plays a part in that as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Ajay, let me ask, since you're on that, what was it? I mean, I think all three of you guys really started from those business outcomes that you were looking to drive and work back into the technology. What was it, Ajay, that you couldn't do with your current approach, or that you needed to do a bit differently, that drove you to start looking towards these cloud-based data and analytics solutions?
Sure. Especially being a manufacturer, the heart of what we do is very transactional. And that's something that most of our reporting was built around. But honestly, it really wasn't built around making the kind of hour to hour, shift to shift type of decisions. It was more of the looking day over day, month over month, year over year. And we really didn't have an easy way to start doing that. We don't, none of our data stack, our on-prem one, was built around that. So we kind of needed to start fresh, and we needed kind of an easy way to get going without having to spend a lot of time building up front. So cloud just literally gave us the easiest chance to kind of just jump in and start trying to deliver some things and get some people thinking in those terms, because that's just not what people were thinking about. They had problems, but they weren't thinking about how we go about solving it, because they didn't know how our current things could solve it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Harry, on your side, I mean, you guys, as a startup, healthcare technology, you guys are growing. Was that really what was causing the driver for you around moving to the cloud, trying to do things quicker and simpler?
It was. So when we look back to the end of last year, we really looked at two pieces, like what we were able to integrate from a feature standpoint, because we've had a backlog that just, it's nice being in a startup because everything feels greenfield, but then it's also part of the challenge of is prioritizing. And so we had this backlog, but some important things we weren't able to do simply because we didn't have the data infrastructure to be doing. So that was one. And then we just looked at our resources. Where were we spending the most time? And what we found is that we spent a lot of time optimizing our data infrastructure. So we're on the reporting side in the sense of our data changes from client to client. And so some clients, it's easy. We don't have a performance issue, but then we get to other clients and suddenly we're now an onboarding process turns into a performance tuning process. And really we just reached kind of the limitations of the data architecture we were in. And largely we need to move so that we could have greater control and also new options. And so that I could return our team to focus on innovating in our product and not so much spending time on DevOps and infrastructure. So that was the primary, but we're finding all kinds of new good options that are now available that we didn't even realize were available 9 months ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you look at what you guys are doing as a startup, then Tyler, to throw it over to you. I mean, you guys have acquired a lot of companies over the years. You're doing a lot of things from a growth standpoint. What was really driving waste management and your move to the cloud?
Well, scalability, I think was the biggest thing, right? Is you get into Snowflake and you get unlimited compute, unlimited storage. There's no problems with concurrency and performance and things of that nature, right? So we had a very traditional on-premise data warehouse appliance. And so what's one of the biggest problems with using an appliance like a Teradata, like an IBM Netezza product or a Greenplum or something of that? Well, it doesn't scale. And the way to scale it is to go off and buy another appliance. And so, we found ourselves in that situation in order to really deliver just kind of the thirst for data within the business, is just explosive. People wanting to do self-service reporting from, all over the country. We operate in both, the US and Canada. And, we really had to solve that problem. And so, we jumped kind of headfirst into the cloud, and it's been a good journey so far.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to mention the scale. I mean, I know Matillion talks a lot about simple, speedy, scalability and savings. You hit on that scale. Ajay and Harry, top one of those dimensions that really stood out to you guys as you were moving your organizations, your data and analytics platforms and products to the cloud. Any of those S's that really you hit on?
Sure, and Ajay, I'll let you go first here.
Yeah, I would say if I'm thinking S's, like simplicity is kind of part of the problem as well, especially when you think of a traditional data stack and what it takes to support it. We needed something that was simple to get started, and that's kind of just the first thing that came to our mind is what can we do to start simple.
Okay, cool. Harry, what about you?
A lot along the same lines. So I think when we met a week ago, what I learned from talking with Ajay and Tyler is that some of the same challenges that we were facing and it was no different in their world. I think there's only so much innovation that we can focus on at one time, and so one of the attractions of Snowflake and Matillion is that we really could just make certain decisions and then move on and go back to focusing back on the data of what we wanted to do with the data. And then as we grew and we learned more about each one of those products, then we could mature our decisions on what ultimately maybe we wanted to tweak or integrate further with. So a lot of the decision was kind of a set it and forget it in a way, so that we could keep our focus on our main core knowledge.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, all these dimensions are so critical. It's a bit of a fine balancing act between what becomes most important in different cases. And Tyler talked about it a little bit. I mean, everybody is looking, I think, to preserve cash and do the most with that dollar that they can. How do you guys think about this consumption-based model, this pay by the drink, pay by the second type model that you get in the cloud? How important is that to you with what you're doing with your data products right now?
Well, from my perspective, it's huge because it allows you to experiment for really low cost. So you increase your rate of innovation just by trying out different products. That's how we ended up using Matillion in the first place. We were able to spin up Matillion in just a matter of a couple of minutes, just by going into the AWS marketplace, where we're already doing business in AWS. So it was really simple, and within I think day one we were able to establish connectivity to our Snowflake environment and connect us to some of our on-prem data sources, and start beginning to experiment with the product. So it's a massive paradigm shift from what we were doing before, and it's really enabled us to move quickly into stand up some valuable solutions for the company.
No, absolutely. And Ajay, let me ask you, I mean, you come from a traditional industry, manufacturing. You guys have been around for a long time. Was there a little bit of fear and trepidation about going to the cloud? Am I going to get the surprise bill? Those types of things. How did you overcome that?
No, that's a great question. In fact, the more when Tyler talks about that simplicity for us, especially when it comes to cloud, was critical because we don't have that knowledge base really built up around how to kind of do it in an optimal way. So before we even got to that point of kind of taking Matillion, the platform we were on to do our BI allowed us to do a little bit more of an all-in-one to get started and just wrap our heads around what it means to have data that needs to go through some steps versus just doing it live. So our first step was on kind of just, let's put it, too much live reporting. And, but it gave you a lot of kind of the user experience that people needed to be confident about, hey, I do want more of that. But Matillion, ultimately, of all the kind of options we looked at, became the easiest way to just take a step in without having to think heavily in terms of how much data it's going to take to do all these things. Honestly, we just weren't ready to think in those kind of terms yet. So cost is a little bit easier for us to just kind of observe and see. And again, the idea of it's on and you're using it is just an easier concept for us to start with than it was to think all the way into how much data this means day to day, chart by chart, dashboard by dashboard.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. It's great insight. And I like what Tyler said too. I mean, I asked about savings, and he spun it around on me and said, we like to be able to experiment. And I think if you don't have that type of cost control that the cloud gives you, that experimentation around a static platform becomes really tough. Let me ask you, Harry, so Tyler and Ajay, a little more traditional. What were you guys coming off of, or what was your pre-Snowflake Matillion platform? Give us a little bit of a sense as a startup what you guys were using.
So we inherited a client server model because that's where the kind of the origin of the data that we're building our analytics around. That's the environments that's been there for 20 plus years. So really, we wanted to remove as many boundaries in the sales cycle to getting adoption. And so we really just focused on integrating into the existing environment. And there was, so as I was listening to Ajay and Tyler, I identify with both those scenarios. Like with Tyler, yeah, we had that day one with Snowflake and Matillion. It was easy, we could experiment. When you asked the question, I tell you, I had flashbacks of a little bit of PTSD because we're coming from a fixed cost model, right? Once you spin up and you get your licensing and your resourcing, you really don't, you don't worry about it. It's not going to change unless you make a decision to change it. When we go into the cloud, I think one of our first focuses on was, okay, we know this will scale easily, but it will scale our successes and our mistakes just as fast. So we really had to look at, all right, how can we set some monitoring, right? Until we can properly define, we needed to set that up mainly because our users are the biggest influencers of how much resources we need to allocate. And we weren't quite ready to just put in auto scaling and suspension policies. We weren't ready to put that in their hands, but at the same time, we did want to take advantage of that. So we kind of had both going in parallel. I guess me more on the defensive side because my team is just ready to jump in, like give them the tools, let them experiment. But you know, ultimately I've got accountabilities to partners and other owners of the company that I don't want to wake up that morning and get that bill. So anyway, yeah, I may have a little different perspective.
No, nobody does. Absolutely. Hey, Ajay and Tyler, what about skill sets? Everybody worries about, I'm going to have all these different skill sets. What do you guys, I mean, are we talking what are the skill sets on the team when we're talking Matillion, Snowflake, and that ecosystem? What do you have today? What do you need that you don't have? Give us a little sense of that.
I think it translates very well. Depends on what you're coming off of, but hey, SQL, right? So if you know SQL, if you're coming from an existing data warehouse environment, ANSI SQL is not that much different. There are some nuances syntactically, but that effectively translates across some of the traditional data warehousing solutions over to Snowflake. And then of course with the Matillion, whether if it's a source object, all you need to know is it's kind of a traditional ETL skill set, right? You need to understand the metadata of your source objects and understand the performance characteristics of the sources you're connecting to, whether that's on-prem or third-party cloud. So we used an existing in our appliance solution in database transformation, ELT. So the concept of ELT within Matillion was not foreign to us. And so, I think it's, ELT, understanding databases, understanding how your databases perform. And, it probably helps to have some scripting skills. We're using Python within our Matillion jobs in certain places to automate, capturing some new source objects and things of that nature. But Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. No, and you mentioned, I hear somebody's got a little meow.
That's awesome.
We can.
We have a fifth participant, Kelly.
Let's
I think
get a
she wants to
webcam
say
on.
something.
No, that's great. Ajay, on your side too, what?
Cat's mad I closed the office door.
Ajay, you guys had a lot of SQL skills as well. How's it translating over into the cloud world for you?
Yeah, no, Tyler kind of hit it really well, that SQL is just, it's a really, really core thing that is, and it kind of depends on what your sources are, but I would say, especially as a traditional kind of manufacturer, again, traditional databases, not, no SQL is not a thing for us. It is traditionally SQL, it's Oracle databases, it's SQL databases. So the SQL knowledge is really kind of our key building block for most of what we were attempting. And that's why, in some ways, I felt like, as long as cloud allowed us to just need to be SQL centric and still be able to find value we can deliver, that was the best place to start. It really, to that end, becomes more, when you need to do more, that's when you realize what you don't, the skill sets you need more of. But then you also start asking yourself the question of, are there tools that maybe allow me to need a little bit less of those skills, more skill sets up front, because the SQL allows them to kind of adapt their skills a bit better. So for us, certainly with Matillion, yeah, SQL was the core starting point, and a little bit of scripting. We kind of grew more into Python, just like Tyler was saying. And but yeah, the SQL, without that, I don't think we would have been able to have the conversations about how we can make this better without just everyone kind of buying in on that key thing.
No, man, I would totally agree with that. I think the SQL side of this is really helping you accelerate in that space. So you guys have all talked about it. It sounds like you all had existing data integration solutions, some traditional stuff sitting out there, your Oracles, Informaticas, SSISs, those types of solutions. That space, we get questions all the time. It is a confusing space when you go, what should I do? I'm interested in how you came to select Matillion. How did you arrive at that as the best fit for you? And I'm sure you're not saying it's the only tool in the bag, but how did you get to that Matillion decision, Harry, originally when you guys made that?
So when we were evaluating, ours was really, we started off with, I guess, just, looking at which cloud providers offered that simple data replication. We got guidance from your team in terms of how we could go about integrating transformations versus just data replication. And so when we looked at it, what it came down to for us was, what was the tool that was going to allow us to implement where we were at in our company life cycle, but then also provide a road forward. I think some of the other ones, this was an interesting one for me because ELT was sort of like the new pattern in data transformation, and moving that to the N, the T to the N, was something that we spent a lot of time talking about. But I found the other providers, their cost models were incentivizing more of the traditional ETL. And so when we looked at Matillion, we just found that Matillion just wanted to charge for the value that we used, not for treating every row of data equal. And then what Tyler had mentioned before about just the ease of getting it going. We looked at some other of the products, and it seemed like we probably spent the majority of our time in the sales cycle versus in the POC cycle. And so that, for us, Matillion, it was like the sales cycle was simple. We could get straight to POC, and ultimately it's kind of the POC is what determines whether or not it's a good fit or not.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I know, Ajay, you guys looked at some POC, POVs as well. From your perspective, what set Matillion apart from the other options that you guys looked at?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly what these guys have talked about as well. The reality of it is that when you have to kind of, when you're in a situation where you don't have all the data you really want and you want to be able to provide more, and I'll be fair, you're competing right now, we're competing against what people do to curate their own data, where they get access to data from a system as opposed to getting it from our traditional data stack. So you have to bring something new to it to kind of get a little bit more buy-in, and bringing data together in a way that they can't easily do themselves. They spend a lot of time doing is key. So one of the challenges with going different directions is if you have to start thinking about each source costing you more money or how much you need of each source, it's like, I'm not used to getting data from that source yet. So I've got to start giving a value to something before I've even realized how much value that data really has or how good the data is. So the idea of just being able to be in a place where I can use it, bring more sources in, think more in terms of all the value I can deliver and not whether each source is worth it, is much easier to chew on, honestly, because it's like the next phase afterwards is to talk about how much value I'm getting and if I want to do it better, faster than I am now. That's where I may consider, okay, what's the next tool I need to do that part better? But when I'm doing it up front, I want to just be able to, again, Tyler talked about it before, experiment a bit and figure out what kind of value I can really deliver with the data that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, aligning that value to the use is so key, and it's really a big shift in a good way from what we've had to do in the past. I totally agree with that. What about Tyler? From the work that you guys did early on with Matillion at Waste Management, any key learnings that you took away from some of that, any adjustments that you made throughout the process that you want to talk about?
Just touching on why we chose the tool just really briefly. I think the environment we came from was a highly customized like scripting solution that was running in like a bash shell, and it was doing in-database transformation, but it was so customized and so unique, if you will. Even though it worked really well in our Netezza environment, I knew I didn't want anything that highly customized to move into this new era. And so we wanted something that was flexible, developer friendly, and was able to connect to basically any kind of data source you can think of, and also at a reasonable cost, right? So there are other vendors out there that will charge you to connect for each different type of data source, even the number of databases within that data source. So some of the licensing models out there just aren't really friendly. So that was one of the things I liked about Matillion, was that you can kind of connect. You're basically paying for your usage, your compute usage, not by connector, because we have dozens and dozens of different types of sources that we need to connect to. We're not only just within the data and analytics space migrating our to the cloud, but the entire company is basically moving towards a more a cloud environment. We're migrating onto some our HR finance systems in the Oracle Cloud. We're utilizing a ton of Salesforce. We completely redesigned our WM.com mobile app experiences to run serverless in AWS. So we've got a lot of data sources out there, whether that's Dynamo or Amazon Aurora or what have you. So we needed something that was flexible, capable of ingesting a variety of different kinds of data sources, accessing third-party APIs. That was one, when we're talking about the skill sets, it's one of the things I left off. It's obviously depending on where you're consuming data, knowledge of RESTful APIs and how they work is critical as well. So, and that we found all that within Matillion. It was easy to use, and also like that was designed specifically for the cloud to leverage the horsepower within, Snowflake or Redshift or Azure Data Warehouse or whatever. And in the, in the event something happens with Snowflake, or we want to move off of it, we want to move on to Redshift, or we want to move on to Azure Data Warehouse. We felt like this would, the portability would be there. We'd be in a good spot with Matillion to be able to migrate to those different platforms if that need ever arose for some reason.
I was going to ask you, you bring up a great point. I mean, we're predominantly talking about your journey from on-prem to the cloud as it relates to on-prem data sources. So the Netezzas, the Oracles, the SQL servers, but you bring up a great point that Matillion can actually accommodate a number of cloud-based data sources. You guys have quite a few of those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So like I said, Salesforce.com,
Yep.
Oracle Cloud, we've got just vendors that we work with that are, we're pulling telematics data in. you know, anywhere where you want to be able to connect to RESTful API services, Matillion can do that.
Yep.
In a micro batch fashion, at least, right?
Yep.
So, and at the end of the day, it's part of the tool in our tool belt, right? So for micro batching, Matillion for ingestion into Snowflake, for real time, we have change data capture tools using ClickText, Attunity replicate solution. So we still have, you know, an old IBM AS400, reliable, you know, it does a lot of our billing and customer order management solutions. So we hook up a change data capture product to that, alongside some other Oracle solutions to stream data into Snowflake. You know, we can leverage whether that's, some of the Amazon pipeline services to drop data into S3. We can have Snowpipe ingestions and things of that nature. So Matillion is one of the tools in our tool belt, but it's a big one.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding. Yeah, Jay, let me ask you, as you're going down this path, on-prem to the cloud, Matillion, Snowflake, anything that stands out with you and your team, and I know you're working with a number of folks within Powell, that, you know, really stands out as something you go, wow, we accomplished that, really proud of that, didn't see that one coming. Anything that stands out to you that way?
I think for sure and especially I mentioned before, as far as because we were used to the traditional data stack and we did things once a day and we were doing live, I think really the idea of turning a corner, Tom mentioned how they use, change data capture, being able to turn the corner and get to a point where we might be able to take some strain off our source systems. I mean, it's a really, really powerful moment when you suddenly realize what you could get out of your source system if you were not doing this, because the fact of the matter is when we put the source system in place, we didn't plan it around so many live reports hitting it. So this many years later, it almost looks like do not plan this environment, right? It's like, you also use your environment in a way you probably didn't intend to. So now you're kind of reaping what you sow, and you need a way to kind of change that conversation. And honestly, change data capture is going to change that conversation for us as far as what things could be like after we, on the other side of a year of even just starting to do reporting this way and change people's mindset around that, because it's possible to do this without just live reporting. Today, that's the only thing they think. They think it's either wait a day or do it live.
Well, no, that's a great point. I mean, if you could bring that same speed and performance and just the trust and reliability to the table with a cloud data warehouse combo like you're using today, I mean, that thinking, I think you can change very, very quickly. Harry, on your side with Viewgol, anything that stands out to you that has, similar to what Ajay talked about, where, just the possibilities have opened up for you guys as you're growing and you're expanding as a company?
Sure. So for us, it really became like the biggest thing was the integration options in the future. So conversations that, when you're inside of I'll call it the kind of traditional Microsoft ecosystem, you tend to start to feel a little bit like some conversations are just non-starters, right? I'm in a relational database, so anything that I want to do to integrate it, or I'm in a fixed resource environment, I've got to almost temper our dreams with the realities of limited resources and, needing to collaborate with other IT infrastructure teams so that we can get the environment adjusted, just so we can, have the conversation, right? And that's the biggest thing that stood out in our transitioning is I feel like the weight around the ideas and the initial conversations, there's not so much of that it's like, there's not so much if I don't have to be the no guy at the party every time, right? Like somebody has to ultimately I love that idea. We just can't do it, right? Or I've been down that road and it doesn't work out. Like now I can free up the team to say, hey, just go out there knowing that it's the cloud, so we can experiment. And we're probably going to have some sort of API that we can integrate with so that we don't have to become experts at whatever we're integrating with just to receive a little bit of data. And so, things like on our side, we've been able to immediately start going down the robotic process automation. previously, because the data was siloed in on-premise environments, it was difficult for us to have a single platform to build our RPA on that was going to integrate with all of these disparate systems, right? It was just kind of a non-starter. Well, now we've got the data there. So now it's a matter of giving somebody the right access and saying, go experiment. And it's low cost and it's really low risk from my perspective and what I'm managing. So
I mean,
that part's been good.
Low cost and low risk. Those are two great metrics, I think.
Yeah, they are.
Tyler, Ajay, you guys have to be thinking along those same lines as well. I love to hear that. Any thoughts along those lines?
Sometimes I'm kind of jealous. I'll be fair. Some of the things they're talking about, like I'm just jealous about, like I shouldn't say jealous, but I'm envious of like just all the effort and all the energy these guys have put in and how far they've gone. And I'm envious because it's like I want to be there. And I feel like, you know, we've made some good progress. You know, we had some stumbling blocks along the way, but just looking forward to being able to do some of these things, enable some of these things, especially when I'm going to be doing more of that. Like it feels great to be in a spot where now we're having a conversation about this, where a few years ago we really weren't. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about now, but yeah, the idea of being able to think about some of the things that Harry's talking about, where before there just wasn't room to have it at all.
How quickly did that shift, Ajay? Because I totally agree. I mean, I can think of companies, you know, a year and a half, 2 years ago that just said, no way, I'm not going to do this going to the cloud. And you talked about this shift that happens really quickly in your organization. What was it? Just the demand coming in? Was it what happened that caused that shift?
If I'm honest, I think that, so we're in a situation where, you know, we've got, and I'm sure these guys know exactly what I'm talking about. You have some legacy systems, right? And some of what you're bound by is what those legacy systems and what you can do to connect to them and how you can support it, the people who support it, things like that. The moment you start trying to answer, I'll say, new challenges in the business with new systems, which, you know, today, a lot of them you're going to start the SaaS conversation right away just because of what it takes to bring in a new system that way compared to the traditional way. All of a sudden you start talking about how you're going to solve those. And it's like, wow, it actually is a totally different thing to solve these kind of, these types of questions now, as opposed to before. You didn't realize what it was like to ask those questions with those systems until you're talking with these systems now. And you're like, oh yeah, we could actually bring that system in and be using data out of it this quickly. Wow. When we put those other systems in, we were kind of like, just get the systems in and figure out the data later. I mean, that seems like almost crazy to even, I'm actually a little bit embarrassed to admit that was part of the conversation back then. Now it seems like crazy, the idea you put an application in and not be thinking about how soon I can use that data for something.
Yeah, no, it happens quick. Now, I totally agree. Tyler, let me ask you, so you guys have done a lot at Waste Management. I'm sure you're looking ahead, not only to the rest of this year, but going into next year as well. I mean, what do you see? I mean, you've accomplished a lot, but I'm sure there's a lot left to do. What do you see as it relates to the cloud, to data integration in general, and just overall, what I got to believe is a pretty high demand for additional data sets, high quality, give me curated, make it fast, easy, quick.
Yeah, Kelly, I mean, you mentioned it, man. That says it all. Yeah, give me all the data immediately.
Yes.
All in one place, all governed, all secure, all accessible, and with all the performance I could ever want in the world. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah, and it's not easy, right? I mean, this is, we talk about it like we just flipped the switch, but I mean, it really is not easy to get there. And you and Ajay and Harry have all talked about, I think, having some of these SaaS-based solutions, these solutions that take some of the infrastructure effort out, allow us to get there a lot quicker. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You know, it doesn't mean there's no risk involved. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I'm still having to deliver enterprise class solutions, and the expectation is that, you know, we have timely, trusted, governed, secure information that is accurate, right, at all times, 24/7. So, you know, there's always a little bit of a risk involved. And you know, just going back to the conversation around, well, how, you know, how do we even get to the cloud as a company? I mean, there was a huge cultural shift that had to take place, you know, several years ago. I mean, I think even just to get an AWS enterprise account stood up, and I think our legal people probably worked on that contract for almost a year or something crazy. But kind of once we got past that initial thing, and then of course once Microsoft is pushing everything into, you know, the Azure cloud with just even just with like Office and Outlook and you know, everything of that nature. So, you know, we probably we weren't at the forefront of the cloud evolution, but we weren't, you know, last either. We're probably someplace in between. You know, as far as where I see things, you know, going for us, I mean, as a company, it's all about the customer, right? How do we, you know, we're taking a hard look at ourselves, and even though we're the leader in the industry, we know that if we don't provide our customers the best information, the best solutions, the best ways to interact with us as a company, that we're, you know, we're in danger of losing market share. And, you know, so we're all about focusing on our customer this year. What are the things that we can do to improve our customer service, or how do we communicate and interact with our customers? You know, doing things like, sure, you can order services online, you can pay your bills online and things of that nature, but what about real-time service event notifications? What about real-time ETAs, as far as, you know, estimated time, when am I gonna service you? You know, we do that for some of our big industrial customers, but not necessarily at the residential level. What else? I mean, so, and we have all this transformation happening across the company. I mentioned that the fact that we're doing our HR people systems are being migrated off of a legacy on-prem PeopleSoft solution. Same on our finance modules, being migrated off of legacy PeopleSoft and into the Oracle Cloud. And then we've got, you know, a bunch of different capabilities we're adding into our .com and mobile experiences to give our customers better service, more options, and more communication. So it's all about the customer. As far as where we're going in data and analytics, we're really trying to enable self-service as what, you know, so there's a multitude of things happening. We've stood up data governance this year, formal data governance council, and security policies and things of that nature relative to how we're going to have, you know, who are the owners of the information in our company. You know, so we have the business owners down through the digital and IT ownership clearly defined. We're implementing tools so that we can catalog and index our information in our enterprise data catalog, so people can understand where our data lives and how they can potentially get access to it. You know, really just, I'm trying to get, you know, as much of our information up in the Snowflake as we can, and then push it downstream and start focusing on the enterprise data warehouse. And we're already doing that today. We're already in production. Matillion's in production. Snowflake's in production. We have key company dashboards and reports running on top of it. The next phase for us is, and we've implemented some logistics and networking optimization solutions for the business. So we've already accomplished a lot this year. Yep. But our roadmap for the rest of this year and into 2021 is really focused about, you know, customer service, insights into our customers, what their behaviors are, and, you know, customer retention, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think you said it really, really well. And all of us, I think, whether you're at Waste Management, Viewgol, Powell Industries, Hashmap, Matillion, Snowflake, I mean, we've all got to be focused, like you said, on that customer. If we are not focused on that end customer, then we become irrelevant really, really quickly. They're going to find another way to do it, right? And so we have to do all of those things that you said to maintain that relevancy. Let me throw it over to Harry real quick. So, you know, you talk about that focus on the customer, that end customer within Viewgol, or those external customers that you may be delivering service to. Is there anything, Harry, right now from your perspective that you would like to take advantage of today, just not quite there, but you're thinking you might see in the future and a future roadmap? Thoughts there? Yeah,
so when we started looking at this transition we wanted to make, we were combining our software and our service as sort of a single delivery. So we have analyst teams that work with our customers to make sure that they're utilizing our products correctly and they're ultimately getting the information they need. And so we've we did that intentionally from the beginning because we knew we couldn't hit all the use cases because we just hadn't met all of our customers and our potential customers. We're trying to now move some of that human resource intensive pieces into our platform so that our customers become more self-service, right? So every reporting change doesn't require a development team interaction, right? And that, you know, it's a good lofty goal, but it does mean that, you know, those features need to get implemented. And that's the real innovation that we wanted to focus on. So I think that's our 2020 for us is really about setting the foundation and getting to a cloud platform so that we can now focus back on to how do we make our product more self-service, because ultimately the sales is going to scale, whether operations or infrastructure can handle it, and you will scale something. That's been my experience, good and bad, you will scale something. So we're trying to make sure that we're intentional about what we're scaling. And so that's where, you know, making this transition, it was key to do it this year for us.
Well, that self-service to me, I mean, that ties right into what Tyler was talking about as well. It goes right to the customer, right? So the self-serve customer, that, you know, high quality curated data sets. I mean, again, it's the ability to be relevant in that way. Yeah, Ajay, man, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I think everybody would be really interested to hear if there are any, call them challenges, maybe mistakes, failure, you know, I hate to say the word failure, but where have you hit some bumps in the road, maybe is a good way of saying it, that are shaping where you are going in the future? Anything that you'd like to share in that regard?
How much time do you have? No. No, I think that the hardest part about doing this, and I mean, these guys know it better than I, and I mean, so do you. That's one of the reasons why we came to you guys with some of our challenges, that there's just so much really to know, and especially when you're tackling this new. In some ways, modernizing our data stack has come first before a lot of our applications have. And I mean, we're not the only ones, but in our case, some of the challenges about matching things up with our particular footprint have been what has been kind of the twists and turns, is thinking, oh, well, you know, this solution says it can do this, then that must mean it works with our, you know, our footprint. Not so much. So I'd say that if anything, it's more just not to assume that things are going to fit, because at least on paper, it sounds like they will. That's, if anything, I would say that that's been the biggest challenge, is just knowing what pieces you're going to need. It's been a good problem. It's kind of a good and bad thing, which is we kind of started at the beginning by trying to get people excited about the idea of delivering data differently. So there was already this kind of desire for people to see us be successful at it. But then the challenge is, you know, can you give them a user experience where you can keep tinkering with making the back of it work better, even while their experience doesn't necessarily change fundamentally every time you do something? So I'd say that that's something we did right, but I would say setting the right expectations about how long it'll take to make this work, let's just say operationally well, is probably the biggest challenge the entire time, is that you just don't know how to set expectations with them when you're trying out tools, and how long it could take to pan out, and how many people it'll take to make it do it well, and if you're trying to be better about the tools you get. So I just say maybe trying to understand what's realistic when it comes to tools versus people is probably one of the biggest challenges up front, and setting those expectations, especially in a case like us where we weren't necessarily replacing one for one. We weren't quite going from a, hey, they have full analytics like they get today on-prem, and we're replacing that one for one with something else. We're trying to take a big leap forward as well as modernizing it. We probably just should have understood better how to promise that and how long it would take, and maybe get into more of an iterational mindset right from the get-go, as opposed to thinking that you could turn the corner quick and then just hide everything that was happening from them. It didn't really work out that way. You just can't get all that stuff solved up front most of the time.
No, that's appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that is a great learning that I think we can all take and use going forward. Let me let's try to take this thing home now, based on, you know, kind of playing off that. Tyler, for you, whether I'll ask it two ways. Maybe the best advice that you got when you were initially kicking off some of your moves into the cloud? And you guys had been out there a little while with Salesforce and other things, but maybe some of the best advice you got, or again, kind of like Ajay talked about, any bumps that you hit that you would have avoided in a second iteration that you want to share?
Well, sure. I mean, Kelly, what kind of a podcast would this be if I didn't mention Hashmap?
Well, I thank you. That's great.
Well, so I knew from prior experiences, first of all, I knew that we didn't know everything. And I knew I didn't know a lot, actually.
We don't either, by the way. I'll just tell you right now.
That's not good advertisement, Kelly.
Just keeping it real.
But no, seriously, I just, so from a database perspective, I understood the power of, parallelism and cloud computing, and, those things are fairly obvious. You don't have to sell too many people on the fact that, hey, you can get unlimited scalability. So once we dove into the database products, and I was comparing, my team and I were comparing architectures against, say, like Redshift and Snowflake. It became apparent to me pretty quickly that Snowflake was the way to go. And then not only that, I started, I had been tracking Snowflake for several, I think when they went GA, I was getting demos from them. And I just, so like 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, yeah, this cloud data warehouse thing, this seems like a pain. How do I get all my data up there? It's going to be super slow. I think the concept was good, but the ecosystem hadn't caught up to them yet.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to, I don't know, probably a couple of years ago, things have caught up, right? And there's an ecosystem or products available around, Redshifts and Azure and Snowflake and what have you. So, the timing just felt right for us. And I knew we were going to have to get off of our appliances as, the IBM products are going, out of support here in the next year or so. So, for us, it was a timing thing. And then just talking to our, other people in the industry, reading articles, keeping my knowledge up, and our Snowflake reps were great. And they have just a bunch of partners. And so, I knew I didn't want to go this alone. So they did recommend Hashmap. I talked to Kelly. We started a relationship, I don't know, probably late 2018 or so. And then we finally, brought in some of their consulting services to help us architect how we were going to do things in Snowflake. And so that's my biggest advice for anyone is, hey, go ahead, find somebody that you trust, and bring them in to help you, and because you're not going to be able to think of everything. So that's what I found. If you're going to break some eggs, that's okay. Just keep going.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, man. Whether it's us or someone else, I like that. Go get some help, because I do think it accelerates the progress that you can make. Harry, let me ask, in terms of bringing it home, any recommendations that you've got on that maybe you haven't talked about already for this on-prem to the cloud migration, modernization that a lot of folks are looking? We've got, we've got probably 20, 30 industries listening to this webinar. What do you recommend? Anything that you haven't already hit on today?
Probably the biggest thing that I've learned is to kind of know your audience. When you're going to get buy-in on this, know your audience and where their level of knowledge about the cloud is. Because, and I actually, it's one of those things where what I thought was going to be a great story to tell ended up kind of setting the wrong expectations. So, when we were pitching, okay, we found Matillion, we found Snowflake. So our total cost of ownership is easy for us to get into, and we're looking at these shorter cycles of implementation. Well, it was easy to sell them on bringing somebody like Hashmap in. So I just want to iterate, like, that is one of the key things, is find somebody who is an expert, just because it's going to take you too long to become that. So if you've got that relationship, great. But once we combine those two things together, what allowed me to bring that into the door had the same effect on then everybody's expectations on when we were going to be done, and how long it would take us to start creating change. Yeah. And so setting up that story, I was listening to what Ajay was saying around separating the technology from the people. And I was thinking that how relevant that is to people understanding that the cloud does enable you to move fast in some areas, but innovation is also a people thing. And as long as people are involved in the process, there's certain bureaucracies that have to be maintained. Like for us, it's HIPAA compliance, right? SOC 2 is an audit that I don't wish on anybody, right? But so you've got to find that balance of creating optimism and enthusiasm, but then also maintaining it, or else you've just kind of created your celebration turns into, you've created this monster now that expects, oh, well, we're in the cloud, right? So we should be able to innovate and come up with 5 new things every single week. And it just, there's certain parts of business that just still don't move that fast. So.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you've got a Snowflake and Matillion in the mix, the technology, I mean, those technologies can do a lot. And I totally agree. So you've got the people aspect and the process aspect. And, you know, again, whether you're a startup like Viewgol, whether you're a larger firm like a Powell or Waste Management, I think all 3 of those dimensions have to be working well. You can have the best technology, but if those other 2 are not aligned, it becomes tough. Great thoughts, Harry. Ajay, let me ask you, anything that you would like to give any either quick visibility to that we haven't talked about already as it relates to your journey at Powell?
I think more than anything else is just to keep an open mind. I think that the as we've talked, everyone's talked about really on this, is that it'd be great if one thing solved all my problems. Unfortunately, it just doesn't tend to work out that way. So I would say being open to what things might be better suited to your problems, to solve your problems. I think that, you know, we all have a similar experience in a way of what Matillion gave us to start, but I think understanding where Matillion fits as you go is also important. Like, it gave us a great place to start and do these things, but it also allowed us to start saying, hey, if we need to do this part really well, what things do that really well? And just, it's okay to focus in on areas that might help you, because that point is, if you can deliver some real value out of it, I mean, you're not going to ignore that idea. But just getting back to what these guys said about having a good partner, I think that's the importance also of a partner. Is a partner is more attuned to how these things could help you, as opposed to you kind of having to do all that discovery on your own sometimes. So for the person himself, it's keeping an open mind. But the other part of it is just keeping an open mind and finding some people that you're comfortable listening to, so that you can at least keep that in your mind every time you're thinking about the next step you can take or the next investment you want to make. Obviously, with operational spend, you have the ability to kind of pivot a bit year to year, and that's huge. Harry brought that up earlier. Like when you're changing models, that it really is quite critical to have that. I actually can't imagine a way of doing this if that was not the way that this requires you to do things.
Yeah, no, you guys all fantastic in terms of wrapping those things up. I mean, you know, Matillion talks a lot again about simplicity, speed, scalability, savings. Those just, you know, everything that you're to me, that's resonating when we're talking about that. I'd wrap it up by saying just a huge, sincere thank you to each one of you. And I guess I should also say certainly to that entire Matillion team that's been working with us to put this together, to orchestrate the webinar. We appreciate all of that. And I really appreciate each one of you guys, Harry, Ajay, and Tyler, sharing your stories, challenges, learnings, advice. I mean, again, let's avoid some of those bumps if we can help it. And for moving on-prem to the cloud and using tools like Matillion and Snowflake services like that as a catalyst. So I wish each one of you guys the absolute best success going forward in your data and cloud journeys. And for everybody listening in today, just a huge thank you for taking the time to join the show, join the broadcast. And I hope that what Ajay and Harry and Tyler have shared will help everyone accelerate their own cloud journey and avoid some of those pitfalls that we've all experienced. Definitely keep in mind that simplicity, speed, scalability, savings that Matillion talks about, because they can be a very key part of that overall cloud solution. We will have the on-demand video and slides available on matillion.com and hashmapinc.com. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks a lot.